Hello everyone, welcome back. Just because we're a small crowd doesn't mean we can't be an attentive crowd, and you guys are great. And now we've come to our last reader of the evening. I've always found it kind of interesting. Anyone who knows me as a reader knows that my favorite thing in the whole wide world are big, epic stories. Like, if it's a series and it has 20 books in it, all the better. Like, I love stories that just go on and on and on, and I don't know why. I have no idea. Ever since I was a kid, I love giant, epic stories. So, I've always sort of found it a little funny that with Burning Effigy I do novellas, which are very, very small, concise stories, and they're fabulous, but they're not the epic stories that I go and buy from the bookstore when I'm in search of something to read for pleasure. So, it was very fortuitous when I met Ian Rogers, because he said, I have this ongoing kind of world that I want to continue to write in. And I'm like, excellent, because I really need an epic story in my roster of fiction I'm putting out with Burning Effigy, and it was just a perfect fit because that was exactly what I was looking for at that time. Because, as I said, epic stories are near and dear to my heart. So now it's 3 years later. Temporary Monsters, come out, been out. The Ash Angels has come out, been out. And this year we launched Black Eyed Kids, the longest Felix Wren story of all the Felix Wren supernatural gumshoe noir stories that we've done yet, and one of the absolute best. And next year we're doing, very careful, no worries. Next year we're doing an entire collection with Ian, which I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit after his reading. But for the time being, I'm going to invite Ian Rogers up on stage. I think he's going to share a little bit from Black Eyed Kids, and then that very special treat I was promising you, which is some never before heard brand new Felix Wren fiction. So please welcome to stage, Ian Rogers.
Thank you very much, Monica. So I'm going to read a very short excerpt here from Black Eyed Kids, which, as Monica said, is the third Felix Wren novella. Just a little bit of background on the story, because I'm sort of jumping into the middle here. The story is basically, the background, I guess, is Felix Wren is a private investigator in a world where the supernatural just exists as a matter of course. It was sort of discovered in the 1940s, and for the last 60 years, people around the world have just been struggling to learn to live with it in their daily lives. I actually had a reviewer, an American reviewer, compare the sense of dread that people are living in this world to the way that some Americans were living in very much post 9/11, dealing with terrorism. And that wasn't, you asked me if that was a metaphor, if that was something I was trying to do, and it wasn't. But that sense of dread of something that where you're worried that something is going to happen, this reality that sort of brought home of something really, really horrible, in that case terrorism. It was a good parallel, I thought, in the sense that supernatural exists in this world. You're not likely to be killed by anything paranormal, but the possibility is there. It's like being struck by lightning, I guess. So in this case, Felix is working on a surveillance case of a woman who ends up dead. Her body is horribly mutilated, and shortly after he comes across the body, he encounters these two small kids who are very, very terrifying for reasons he can't quite articulate. And since these are new entities that he's never encountered before, he goes to a contact at the Paranormal Intelligence Agency that he had made actually back in the Ash Angels. So this is the excerpt that I'm going to read. Just trying to get the light on this.
It's not easy.
The elevator stopped on sub-level 7. The doors slid open and Dr. Kovac was there waiting for me. I sort of recognized him, even though the last time I'd seen him he was wearing a hazmat suit. He was a short, stocky man with gray hair receding from a perpetually furrowed brow. Today he was wearing a white lab coat over gray work pants, a light blue shirt and a dark blue tie. Both shirt and tie were dusted with a white powder that might have been chalk. Felix Wren. Kovac's hand popped up like the flag on a mailbox. I stepped out of the elevator and shook it. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Kovac led me down a long hall. We made 2 turns down branching corridors, and then he held open a glass door that led into a wide, spacious laboratory. Every square inch of table space was taken up by scientific equipment that looked both complicated and expensive. I made a mental note to touch nothing. Kovac parked himself on a stool in front of a workstation that had a small space cleared on it. Sitting in the middle of this bare spot was a cardboard box of powdered donuts. The cellophane was peeled back to reveal one partially denuded row, and I realized where the stains on Kovac's shirt and tie had come from. Kovac picked up the box and offered it to me. "Try one," he said. "They're new." I plucked a donut out of the tray and popped it into my mouth. It tasted like a gooey ball of sugar with a faint hint of donut. I said. Kovac nodded approvingly. "We don't even know what they are. We found them in the Blacklands." I stopped chewing. I would have spit out the entire mess if I didn't see the corners of Kovac's mouth turn up in a wicked little grin. "PIA humor?" I said in a gloppy voice. Kovac nodded. "The popular misconception is that the PIA has no sense of humor. The truth is we do, but once people discover it, they wish we didn't." "I wonder why," I said, swallowing thickly. Kovac crossed one leg over the other, interlaced his fingers, and propped them on top of his knee. "Now," he said, "I understand you're having a problem with the Becks." "The Becks?" "The Black-Eyed Kids. The PIA really like their acronyms, huh?" Kovac gave a small shrug. "It's what we do in our spare time. We've got to spend those taxpayers' dollars on something." "So you've heard of them?" "I have." "Why haven't I?" A small frown creased Kovac's face. "The Becks are not what you'd call a natural phenomenon of the paranormal, of the supernatural, if you follow me." "I don't." Kovac sighed. "Let me try to explain this another way. Most people have a basic knowledge of the Blacklands, the stuff they learned in school, and as such they are only familiar with the basic entities, vampires, were-creatures, possessors, what have you. They don't see the bigger picture, which is, the Blacklands are vast. Conspiracy theorists would have you believe the PIA has explored the entire dimension, but that simply isn't true. It's not even close to true." Kovac threw his head back and let out a rusty laugh. "We've managed to map out a substantial section of the Blacklands, but most of it is largely unexplored. And even though we've cataloged dozens of different species, there are dozens, probably hundreds more, waiting to be discovered. Between those we know about and those we don't are the Black-Eyed Kids, a veritable supernatural anomaly." "What does that mean?" "It means we know they exist, but we don't really know anything about them." Kovac must have seen the dispirited look on my face. "Well, I shouldn't say we don't know anything." Before I could perk up, he added, "Just nothing useful." "So you've encountered them before," I said. Kovac's face twisted in a pained expression. "Yes," he said reluctantly. "I'll take any advice I can get." "Well, tell me about your encounter first." So I did. Kovac leaned forward and listened intently while I recounted my story. He watched me with avid eyes and nodded his head at several points during my narrative. It was hard to tell if he was sympathetic to my plight or merely fascinated by it. When I was finished, I asked him what he made of it. "I think the most unusual part of your story," Kovac said, "is that you were hired by a man named Barry to keep an eye on a woman named Mandy, and you had no idea they were using false names." "That fact has been firmly established," I said curtly. "Moving on." Kovac remained silent for a long time. His face was impassive. I couldn't tell if he was deep in thought or if he had fallen asleep with his eyes open. Finally, he said, "Have you ever heard of Mothman?" He sounds like a superhero who wasn't cool enough to make it into the Justice League." Mothman was the name given to an entity sighted in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the late 1960s. It was described as a humanoid with hypnotic red eyes and enormous wings. One of the key characteristics of Mothman was its ability to instill an intense, paralyzing fear in those who encountered it. I closed my eyes and saw the Black-Eyed Kids standing outside my car door, tapping on the window. "Most supernatural entities have that effect on people." "Agreed," Kovac said. "But this case was different. Mothman gave off fear the way a cracked nuclear reactor gives off radiation. By the time things came to a head in Point Pleasant, hundreds of people had seen Mothman, and the town was awash in fear and paranoia." "Did you work on that case?" I asked. Kovac shook his head. "It was before my time." "What does this have to do with the Black-Eyed Kids?" "The people in Point Pleasant weren't just seeing Mothman. Over a year-long period, all manner of paranormal phenomena were reported. UFOs, poltergeist activity, ball lightning, EVP, premonitions, lost time, and men in black." "Men in black." Kovac spread his hands. "Some of those reports were undoubtedly about us. The PIA sent 6 agents to Point Pleasant in the fall of 1966. They investigated for 2 months but never saw a Mothman. They saw something else though. Black-eyed kids. And I think I'm just going to stop right there. And I'm going to